The first time Nolen Fray stepped into the Interstellar Exchange campus on the orbital station orbiting Kepler 62F, he felt like a misplaced action figure in a toy aisle full of holographic jellyfish and crystalline giraffes. He adjusted his vest, a matte black utility-style garment with reinforced shoulders, a high collar, and a dozen zippers that didn't actually lead to any pockets. It was fashion. Earth fashion. From a boutique in Manhattan that claimed to redefine urban warrior aesthetics. It cost him 400 credits and came with a sticker that read, "Combat Ready Look, not Combat." As he passed a group of alien students clustered near the hydration pods, he noticed one of them staring, not subtly. The creature had two large violet eyes and skin that shimmered like wet paint. Its name tag glowed. Tessac. Tessac tilted its head, then turned to the insectoid beside it. They whispered something, and both turned to look at Nolen again, not at his face, but specifically at his vest. Nolen sighed. He kept walking, scanning the room for the Earth Studies desk. His assignment was simple: teach a semester-long crash course titled Human Sociology and Culture, Interpretive Practices of a Post-Industrial Species. Basically, explain why humans did the odd things they did, like wearing sunglasses at night, naming sandwiches after cities, and watching horror films for fun. He finally spotted the desk, staffed by a humanoid with coral pink skin and a bored expression. As he approached, the humanoid squinted. "You're the human educator, Nolen Fray." "Yes, your protective gear, it's regulation," Nolen blinked. "What? Oh, this isn't protective gear, it's just clothes," the humanoid frowned. "It has reinforced seams and armored panels. It's just for style, fashion, Earth fashion, it's not real armor." The humanoid turned to a console and tapped rapidly. "That contradicts the safety file on humans we received from the previous semester. It stated your species wears body armor in social settings due to high ambient threat levels." "Yeah, that's just New York, mostly." He responded with a grunt and handed Nolen a room key. "Just be advised, host students are impressionable. Your attire may be interpreted as an escalation." That evening, Nolen unpacked in his assigned quarters, a compact modular pod with a single bed, a bio-sink, and a window that framed the gas giant beyond. He laid his clothes out on the wall hooks. All of them were variations of tactical jackets, cargo pants with strap accents, and boots that looked like they could survive a volcano. There was a soft chime. Door sensor. He opened it to find Tessac standing there, holding a datapad. "Educator Fray," Tessac said, voice smooth and metallic. "We request a clarification." "Sure, what's up?" Tessac looked him up and down. "You are unarmed." "Correct. But you wear armor." Nolen smiled awkwardly. "It's not armor, it's fashion. It just looks like armor." Tessac paused. "You simulate battle readiness as a cultural aesthetic." "Yeah, I guess that's one way to put it. Do you not find that disorienting?" "Not really, it makes people feel cool." Tessac stared at him a moment longer, then nodded and walked away. The next morning, Nolen arrived at his first lecture. The amphitheater was filled with students from at least a dozen species, most of them seated in their preferred environmental zones: cold mist, dry heat, or nutrient fog. As he stepped onto the platform, he noticed something odd. Half the students were wearing armor, not real armor, imitations. One had wrapped its body in metallic foil. Another wore a chest plate made of what looked like carved vegetable matter. One had glued a dozen tablet screens to its torso. Nolen raised a brow. Class. What's going on with the outfits?" A student with a translucent neck frill raised a limb. "We have adopted Earth formal wear to demonstrate respect." He blinked. "Formal wear? This isn't formal, this is just trend stuff." "Streetwear?" Another student, covered in moss and tiny blinking lights, added, "We inferred from your appearance that humans maintain armor as a baseline requirement for interspecies engagement. We wish to avoid diplomatic insult." Nolen rubbed his eyes. "It's actually the opposite. If a human shows up wearing real armor to a social event, People think something's wrong. There was a ripple of confusion across the group. "You misunderstand," said Tessak. "Your species' mimicry of combat garments implies a civilization in constant preparation." "We believed it signaled caution." Nolen chuckled, then realized no one else was laughing. He cleared his throat. "Okay, let's back up. Today's lecture will be on fashion semiotics. We're going to talk about why humans wear what they wear and what it says about them or doesn't." 2 weeks later, things spun further out of control. Nolen returned from a meeting with the station's cultural liaison to find a message alert blinking in his room. He played it. Urgent. Student Tessak has been injured during a simulated melee in the recreation dome. Incident attributed to extracurricular armor testing. He bolted out of the room. In the medical bay, Tessak lay inside a glowing containment field. A pale gash ran down the side of its torso. A medical drone hovered nearby, administering a slow-release salve. Nolen stepped forward. "Tessak, what happened?" Tessak opened one eye. "We observed that your armor is not functionally defensive. We hypothesized that perhaps it conveys protection through psychological assertion. We attempted to replicate this. It failed. You tried to test if fake armor could scare away danger. Yes, we provoked a Dormalath student known for aggressive sparring. We assumed our armor-like appearance would deter engagement. It did not." Nolen rubbed his face. "You got into a fight to test a theory about fashion intimidation." "Yes. Did anyone tell you that's not how humans test clothing?" Tessak's eye shifted. "Your culture is contradictory." No argument there. Tessak was released from the medical bay 2 days later. The gash would leave a mark, but nothing permanent. The incident had already started a ripple across the student body. By the end of the week, a dozen students had enrolled in Nolen's elective: Earth Fashion, Identity, Symbolism, and Misinterpretation. As part of the new syllabus, he brought in old photos: punk rockers in studded leather, Wall Street brokers in armored trench coats from the 80s, riot grunge from the Seattle scene. He explained irony. He explained that humans often dressed in ways that contradicted their intentions. At the end of a particularly intense session, one student raised a limb. "If humans simulate protection through fashion but are not actually protected, is that not dangerous?" Nolen nodded. "Sometimes, but we don't always dress for function. Sometimes we dress for expression, or rebellion, or confidence, even if it increases risk." "Yeah, that's kind of the point sometimes." That night, as he walked back to his quarters, he found a package outside his door. Inside was a vest stitched from synthetic fibers, reinforced at the shoulders with a patch on the back that reads "Civilian, do not engage." There was no note, but the stitching was clearly alien. Probably Tessak. He grinned and hung it up. 3 days later, things took another weird turn. While crossing the atrium to grab lunch, Nolen heard a sharp crack and then a thud. He turned to see one of his students, a young Zalari, collapsed on the floor beside the fountain, clutching its side. He rushed over, kneeling. "What happened?" the student coughed. "We were testing ballistic resistance of homemade armor from Earth recyclables." Nolen's stomach dropped. "You used what?" "Earth garbage, cans, plastics, laminated panels. We believed humans may use such materials for covert defense." He looked around, spotting a pile of crushed debris. A makeshift vest lay among it, flattened. Medical staff arrived quickly, assessing the injuries. Multiple fractured ribs, contusions. The student would recover, but it was serious. That evening, Nolen stood before the administration board. The station director, a stoic being composed entirely of light and metal, addressed him. "You must cease all fashion-based lectures until further notice. Your students are endangering themselves." Nolen stood straight. "With respect, the problem isn't the lectures, it's the assumptions being made. These students aren't trying to harm themselves, they're trying to understand us. We wear things that look like armor but aren't. That's confusing. But if we stop the dialogue, they'll keep guessing, and guessing is what got someone sent to the medbay." The director paused. "You propose a solution. Yes, I want to host a live demonstration. Let me show them where fashion ends and function begins. Let them see how humans really approach protection versus expression. The director nodded slowly. One chance, no injuries. Nolen smiled. Agreed. 2 days later, the atrium had been transformed into a makeshift runway. A dozen students sat in seats arranged in a semicircle. Nolen stepped out first, wearing a bright yellow raincoat over a three-piece suit. He struck a pose. "Is this armor?" he asked. The students murmured. "No." "It's a fashion statement. It's absurd, it's impractical, and it's very human." He walked off. Then came another outfit, a biker jacket with metal studs followed by an actual protective vest used by police officers. He explained each one, how humans often blurred the line between safety and style not out of confusion, but because they liked the ambiguity. By the end, Tessak stood and approached the stage. "Educator Fray," he said, "we understand now the armor is not to protect your body. It is to project your identity." Nolen nodded. "Exactly." Tessak turned and addressed the others. "Then we must not mimic the shape of human armor but the courage it represents, the willingness to be vulnerable while looking invulnerable." The students applauded. Later that night, Nolen sat in his room, sipping lukewarm tea. He looked at the vest with "Civilian Do Not Engage" stitched across it and smiled. He might still look like he was ready for a war, but at least now they understood it wasn't the kind fought with weapons. It was the kind fought with fabric and confusion, and the occasional zipper that led nowhere. Tessak arrived at Nolen's office just after third cycle rest period, a time typically reserved for metabolization or, in the case of humans, lunch. Nolen was hunched over a narrow desk, poking at a stubborn thermal dispenser that insisted on serving lukewarm broth no matter the setting. "You said this would be chicken," he muttered, tapping the control screen again. "I require clarification," Tessak said, stepping into the room without ceremony. Nolen turned, still holding the steaming cup. "On what? If it's about the vest again, I already explained. No, this is a different matter. I have reviewed over 600 hours of archived Earth footage." "Okay. That's a lot." I found a recurring theme. "In many of your visual narratives, humans who wear armor are either mythic warriors or emotionally repressed protagonists. That's not entirely wrong. Then my question is this: is emotional repression a prerequisite for armored attire in human society?" Nolen stared at him, brow raised. "You're asking if people wear body armor because they're emotionally constipated," Tessak considered it. "In a manner of speaking." Nolen set the cup down carefully, as if afraid it might explode. "No, people wear it to look tough or mysterious, or because they just like it. It's not about hiding feelings." Tessak blinked twice. "But the characters in your media often conceal trauma behind their protective gear." "Sure, in fiction, but that's not real life. I mean, look," he stood up and tapped his chest. "This is just a jacket." "There's no psychological subtext." Tessak tilted his head. "Then why do you wear it when alone?" Nolen opened his mouth to argue and closed it again. "I like the weight," he said finally. "It feels solid." There was a long pause. "You're not going to write that down, are you?" "I am already compiling a hypothesis." "Of course you are." Later that evening, Nolen wandered into the shared observatory dome, a low-gravity chamber with tiered seating and a wide, transparent ceiling that offered uninterrupted views of the local star cluster. Only a few beings lingered at that hour, most in quiet pairs. One of them, a pale blue biped wrapped in gauzy fabric, turned and waved him over. He recognized her from his elective course. Arii, a Varnian who had a habit of cross-referencing everything he said with 4 separate cultural databases. "I hope I'm not interrupting," he said, sliding into the low-slung seat beside her. "You are, but it's acceptable." "Comforting." She tapped her panel and a holographic projection of a Terran runway shimmered into view. Models strutted in exaggerated silhouettes, their clothing a fusion of historical armor and absurd embellishment. "I have studied more than 50 human fashion rituals. I still cannot decipher the purpose of the shoulder spikes." Honestly, neither can we. They just look cool. Cool as in temperature? No, cool as in, never mind, Arii leaned back, antennae twitching. Your species willingly adds discomfort to its garments, spikes, zippers that serve no function, shoes that hinder locomotion. Why, we like to suffer in style. It's a whole thing. But why choose form over function? Because function is boring and humans get bored fast, she frowned. That is a catastrophic design flaw, tell me about it. The following morning, Nolen was summoned to the station's infirmary, again. This time, it was a Yelek student named Briln, who had attempted to replicate a human goth aesthetic using scavenged metal plates and adhesive pigment. Unfortunately, Yelek's skin excreted a mild acid that reacted poorly with the paint, causing blistering along the thorax. Nolen stood outside the treatment unit, watching through the glass as medical drones applied a soothing gel. A thin mist hissed around Briln's body, neutralizing the chemical reaction. A tall, insectoid nurse approached him, her compound eyes unreadable. This is the third case this cycle. We are running low on dermal neutralizers. I didn't tell them to do this, Nolen said. Intent is not under review, outcome is. I'll talk to them. You said that last time, and I meant it last time. She didn't respond, just turned and walked away. Back in his classroom, Nolen found the students already assembled. Tessak stood near the front, surrounded by a small cluster of peers. Every single one wore something new. A gelatinous being wore a cloak fashioned from what looked like heat-shielding foil. A quadruped with frilled ears had wrapped its limbs in interwoven cables. Tessak wore a sleek tunic made from black synthetic mesh patterned with reflective triangles. Before you say anything, Tessak said, we have absorbed your previous instruction. Really? Yes. We have concluded that the essence of human fashion lies not in replication, but interpretation. Nolen rubbed the bridge of his nose. Okay, let's establish a new rule. No more using materials that react with your biology, no adhesives, no metals that corrode in oxygen-rich atmospheres. No binding tape. If you want to explore fashion, do it with safe materials. Tessak nodded. We have already begun sourcing textiles from the station's recycling center. That's not much better, but it is not corrosive, he sighed. Fine. Just if you get a rash, don't tell me about it. As class began, Arii raised a limb. I would like to discuss the concept of power dressing. Is the purpose to simulate dominance? It's a way to project confidence, Nolen said. You dress like the kind of person who's in charge, and sometimes people treat you that way. Deceptive visual signaling, she said. Fascinating. It's not deception, it's aspirational lying, the class murmured approvingly. By the end of the cycle, the station's corridor cameras had begun picking up a noticeable trend. Students across multiple species were experimenting with human-inspired fashion. Exaggerated shoulders, asymmetrical cuts, structured silhouettes. The station's AI flagged it as a potential subcultural movement. Nolen received a message from the liaison office offering him a cultural adaptation consulting stipend. He accepted, mostly because his dispenser still refused to produce anything resembling soup. 1 week later, he was invited to the dormitory commons for what the students called a human-coded social ritual. He arrived to find the open space transformed, colored lights pulsed against the walls. A curated playlist of earth music played an eclectic mix of synthwave, industrial, and a surprising amount of late 90s pop. Students mingled, their outfits ranging from elegant to absurd. Tessak approached, balancing a tray of drinks that glowed faintly. We have constructed a scenario that simulates an Earth party. Nolen took a drink cautiously. This doesn't contain anything that'll knock me out, right? No, we researched human liver tolerances. Not reassuring, across the room, Briln waved. His skin had healed, and he wore a simple tunic dyed with a non-reactive pigment. Nolen raised his glass in return. You know, he said, turning to Tessak, I never expected to become a fashion ambassador. We did not expect your garments to be so conceptually complex. It's not even a good jacket. It is now a symbol, Nolen laughed. Of what? Resilience, adaptability, and mild confusion. He clinked his glass against Tessac's. I'll take it. The lights dimmed further. A projection appeared on the far wall, a montage of Earth fashion through the centuries, from medieval armor to punk streetwear to virtual reality couture. The students watched in silence, some with awe, others with analytical concentration. As the montage ended, Arii stepped forward. We have concluded that human fashion is not merely clothing, it is emotional architecture. Nolen blinked. That's actually very accurate. We wish to study more, you can. But do it safely? Tessac nodded. We are learning. As the night drifted on, Nolen sat in one of the lounge pits, surrounded by beings who had once thought his jacket meant he was preparing for war. Now they wore their own versions, not to mimic threat, but to explore meaning. And for the first time since arriving on the station, Nolen felt like he wasn't just explaining humanity. He was expanding it. The maintenance sublevel beneath the exchange campus had never hosted a formal gathering. It was a place of exposed conduit lines, faint ozone tang, and repair drones that blinked politely but never yielded the right of way. When Nolen arrived 20 minutes later than he'd meant to be, he found the space transformed into something that looked like a cross between a fashion lab and a salvage depot. Tessac stood in the middle, surrounded by racks of repurposed fabrics suspended on magnetic cables. A tall, avian student snipped at a length of mesh with surgical scissors while a quadruped with iridescent fur inspected a pile of fastenings. "Welcome," Tessac said without looking up. "You're just in time for the final fitting." Nolen stepped over a coil of tubing. "Final fitting for what?" "Our exhibit submission. You approved the cultural showcase proposal." "I approved a proposal to display Earth fashion interpretations." "I didn't approve a..." He paused as Briln emerged from behind a screen, cloaked in something that looked dangerously like a medieval tabard, except it was made of translucent polymer sheeting and fastened with insulated wire. "Is that wearable?" "Yes," Briln said, rotating. "It allows for heat dissipation and visual continuity. We modeled it after your historical nightwear. It looks like a recycling bin became self-aware." Briln beamed. At least, Nolen assumed that's what the subtle flicker along his jawline meant. Tessac gestured toward a bench. "We require your feedback on the thematic balance between intimidation and celebration." "I'm not sure those are two things that belong together." "On the contrary," Tessac said, adjusting a magnetic clasp, "your species has demonstrated a preference for juxtaposing symbols of aggression with rituals of unity. Military parades, competitive sports, wedding tuxedos." "That last one's a stretch." Tessac turned sharply. "Do they not resemble small-scale uniforms? I mean, if you squint. We have been squinting extensively." Nolen leaned against a support beam. "All right. Let's see what you've got." One by one, students emerged from behind a partition hung with heat insulation blankets. Each wore an outfit that defied logic but somehow adhered to a thread of human cultural understanding. One ensemble combined a three-piece suit with flexible tubing and shoulder-mounted lights. Another featured a layered tunic with imitation rank insignia and a belt made from flattened utensils. "Where did you get cutlery?" "The cafeteria surplus bin." Nolen raised a hand. "Please do not weaponize forks. They are fastened. Non-removable, still, don't." The last student to appear wore a long, segmented coat that shimmered with embedded microreflectors. It trailed slightly behind them, and when they turned, the hem caught the ambient light and scattered it across the floor in a staccato pattern. "That's actually kind of beautiful." "We based it on your ceremonial graduation robes," the student said. Nolen blinked. "Graduation robes don't usually glow. We assumed that was a manufacturing limitation." He sat down heavily on the bench. "Okay, look, I appreciate the effort, I really do." But if you're wearing this in public, people are going to think Earth is filled with glittering warlocks. Is that inaccurate? Extremely. Tessak approached with a handheld scanner. We are calibrating for temperature fluctuations. Some students are experiencing mild thermal stress due to fabric layering. Then reduce the layers. But that would compromise the aesthetic complexity. It's not worth heatstroke. Humans tolerate thermal discomfort for fashion. Yeah, but we also get heat exhaustion, and sunburn, and dehydration. And then we go to a hospital and act surprised. Tessak paused. We had not accounted for that final step. Good, don't. It's not a cultural virtue, it's a mistake. There was a brief silence as a small spherical student fumbled with a pair of boots shaped like trapezoids. The left one emitted a soft wheeze. Nolen stood. Okay, everyone listen. Tomorrow's showcase is about interpretation, not impersonation. I need you to be able to walk, breathe, and not faint from overheating. What about symbolic constraint? Asked Arii, appearing from behind a pylon. Some earth garments imply a willingness to endure pain for aesthetic dominance. Symbolic or not, I'm not filing incident reports because someone passed out from a vinyl corset. Corset? Someone echoed. Is that a required component? No, please, no corsets. Tessak inclined his head. We will adjust our designs to prioritize function without compromising thematic integrity. Thank you. Nolen took a deep breath. Now let's talk footwear. No one should be taller than they normally are by more than 2 inches. That's not me being strict, that's gravity. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of recalibrations, safety checks, and a heated debate about whether holographic accessories violated the spirit of analog fashion. By the time Nolen left, his eyes were gritty and his throat was dry. The next morning, the Exchange Campus Commons had been temporarily converted into an exhibition hall. Rows of luminescent panels displayed cultural artifacts from dozens of species. The humans had been given a modest corner between the Krill's kinetic sculpture and the Doran scent archive. Nolen arrived early, wearing a plain button-down and jeans, no armor, no stylistic flourishes, just cotton and denim. He wanted to make a point. Tessak greeted him, calm but visibly focused. We have restrained the more unstable elements. Good. Any adhesive involved? Minimal. As the first visitors arrived, the human section activated. The students stood proudly beside their creations, ready to explain the thinking behind each one. A tall, insectile ambassador paused before Briln's polymer cloak. Is this ceremonial? No, Briln replied. It is inspired by a human form of recreational identity exaggeration known as cosplay. The ambassador nodded slowly. Fascinating. Another delegate, a dense, plant-based entity, examined the glowing hem of the segmented coat. Is this for attracting mates? No, the student answered, but it could be repurposed. Nolen watched from the side, arms crossed, as more and more attendees stopped to ask questions. Some laughed, some took notes. One even asked if the humans were accepting fashion apprenticeships. Later, during the interspecies debrief, the station director approached him. Your students have generated significant interest. I noticed. Several cultures have requested access to Earth fashion media. There is concern, however, about the practicality of some designs. I can assure you, none of them are dangerous. You may be the only human capable of explaining why sharp shoulders and asymmetry convey confidence. I'll add it to my resume. As the exhibition wound down, Tessak joined him near the observation deck. You did well, Nolen said. No injuries, no collapses, no one tried to test ballistic resistance. We have evolved beyond that phase. Let's not go that far. Tessak blinked once. Still, your species' fashion is not just clothing, it is a language. One that demands translation, not imitation. Nolen nodded. That's exactly it. We would like to continue studying it, beyond aesthetics. You mean psychology and symbolism and contradiction. There is much still unexplored. He glanced at the students, who were now laughing with a group of curious delegates, explaining why someone would wear a leather jacket in summer. All right, Nolen said. But next time we start with socks, no symbolism, just comfort. Tessak tilted his head. Socks are considered cultural only when they are mismatched. Together, they watched as the last light from the exhibit dimmed and the students began packing away their creations carefully, reverently, like relics of a language they'd only just begun to speak.